750,000.
It's a number that's so big, it's almost meaningless.
Right. It's hard to even picture. But think about it like this. If you took 750,000 standard sheets of paper and stacked them, you'd have a tower about 250 feet high.
Wow.
Yeah. Taller than the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Just a monument of paper.
And we're not talking about, printer paper. We're talking about secrets.
Exactly. Classified United States government secrets.
Mm-hmm.
More specifically, we're looking at 251,287 diplomatic cables.
Mm-hmm.
Another 482,832 Army reports for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then there were the videos.
Ah, yes. The videos. The ones that, you could argue, completely changed how the public viewed modern warfare.
I think that's a fair argument. And this leak, it was a cataclysm. By any measure, the biggest leak of classified info in U.S. history up to that point.
Oh, it dwarfed the Pentagon Papers. It wasn't even in the same league. And this is where the story just explodes into two completely opposite narratives.
Right.
Because on one side, you have supporters calling it, and this is a quote, the beginning of the information age exploding upon itself. They saw it as the thing that helped kickstart the Arab Spring.
The moment of radical transparency.
Yes. And on the other side, you have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Michael Mullen, saying it was an act that directly, quote, endangered lives.
And put troops on the ground in real jeopardy.
A reckless, dangerous dump of information. So traitor or hero, it really depends on who you ask.
And at the dead center of this hurricane, of all this data and geopolitics and espionage, you have one person.
A single person.
A very junior, low-level intelligence analyst. At the time, known to the world as Private First Class Bradley Manning.
But who the world now knows as Chelsea Manning.
And you really can't separate the two stories, can you? The story of the leak and the story of the person.
You absolutely cannot. This is not just a straightforward story about national security and hackers. It's a deeply, deeply human story. It's about identity. It's about mental health. It's about profound isolation. It's about a crisis of conscience that just happened to play out on a global stage.
That's exactly. And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We're going to try to move past those simple headlines.
Yeah.
Everyone remembers the headlines, right? The traitor banner on cable news. The hero signs at protests.
Mm-hmm.
We want to get to the why. How does a bullied kid from Oklahoma end up in a dark room in Iraq, lip-syncing to Lady Gaga while burning state secrets onto a compact disc?
It's such a surreal image when you stop and think about it. It sounds like something out of a movie.
But it happened.
Yeah.
And to understand that moment, to understand how all that data walked out the door on the CDRW, we have to go back.
Way back. We have to look at the making of the analyst.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Chelsea Manning was born in Oklahoma City in 1987. Her father, Brian, he was former military, an intelligence analyst in the Navy, actually.
Right, there's some irony there.
And her mother, Susan, was Welsh. And right from the jump, the sources we have paint a picture of a home life that was just incredibly unstable.
It sounds like it was unbelievably difficult. The source material is pretty clear that both parents were struggling with alcoholism.
Seriously struggling.
Yeah, during the court-martial years later, Manning's own sister testified that their mother drank constantly while she was pregnant with Chelsea.
Wow.
And it gets heavier. A Navy psychiatrist actually testified in court that Manning's facial features showed signs consistent with fetal alcohol syndrome.
That's a really hard start to life.
Yeah.
And the stories of neglect are just heartbreaking. There's testimony that as a baby, Manning was fed only milk and baby food until she was 2 years old.
Just a fundamental neglect, physically, nutritionally.
And emotionally. That's the theme that just keeps coming up again and again, isn't it? Isolation.
Complete and total isolation. The father was often away for work, the mother was often incapacitated by her drinking, and Manning was just left alone.
There are these stories from neighbors who said that when there were school field trips, they would specifically pack extra food for Manning because they knew she wouldn't have any.
That's just devastating.
It really is. And you get this image of a lonely kid playing with Legos or retreating into the family computer because that's the only place that made sense.
And you see that pattern a lot, don't you, with people who end up in tech or, the hacker world. The logic of machines is predictable. It's reliable.
Inputs equal outputs.
Exactly. People are messy. Families are messy. And this family was messier than most.
So then the whole picture shifts. When Manning is 14, her parents get divorced. And she moves with her mother to Haverfordwest in Wales.
So she's pulled out of everything she knows and dropped into a new country. As a teenager, which is hard enough.
But imagine being the only American kid in a Welsh high school in the early 2000s.
And it wasn't just that she was American. The other kids saw her as effeminate. And you have to remember the context here, the early 2000s, the conversation around gender identity was, well, it basically wasn't happening.
Not in a mainstream way, no.
So she's grappling with this profound internal reality in an environment that is, to put it mildly, not inclusive. The bullying was apparently just relentless.
There's one story, one anecdote from the sources that just it gets under my skin every time I read it.
Is this the camping trip?
The camping trip. It's so cruel. She goes on a trip with her classmates, and they just leave her.
They abandoned her, woke up, and the campsite was empty.
Can you even imagine that? Waking up alone in the woods because your classmates just decided to pack up and leave you behind? That level of social rejection it's a physical thing.
It creates such a profound sense of being an outsider. And when you're an outsider in the real world, the physical world, where do you turn?
The digital world. The one you can control.
Precisely. While her social life was just a wreck, her skills with technology were absolutely taking off. This is someone who built a website when she was 10 years old.
That's incredible.
At 15, while she's living in Wales, she and a friend start an online message board, angeldine.com. She had agency there. She was the admin. She made the rules.
A safe space that she built herself.
Right. But that time in Wales doesn't last. She eventually comes back to the U.S., tries living with her father again, but that old instability is still there. She gets a job at a software company, Zoto.
And she's good at the work, right? The technical side.
Very good. But the social issues, the stress, it's still there. And she ends up getting fired after an incident where she reportedly just locked up, stared blankly at her screen for hours.
Almost like a system crash. A human blue screen of death.
It does sound like that, like a total shutdown from overwhelming stress. And after that, it's a downward spiral. She ends up homeless for a time.
Living out of a pickup truck.
Yeah, just drifting. Eventually, she lands with an aunt in Maryland, and that seems to be the first real period of stability she's had in her young adult life.
And it's from that place of stability that she makes the decision that changes. Well, everything.
She enlists in the Army.
It's 2007. The Iraq war surge is all over the news. Her father, the ex-Navy man, is pushing the idea. And Manning has these two very clear, very specific reasons for doing it.
The first one is practical.
Right. The GI Bill.
Yeah.
She was smart. She wanted to go to college, get a PhD in physics. The Army was a means to an end.
But the second reason is, it's just so specific to her internal struggle. It's almost heartbreaking. She told a supervisor later, explicitly, that she joined the Army hoping the masculine environment would, quote, resolve her gender dysphoria.
She thought she could man up so hard that it would just go away.
She was trying to cure herself through immersion therapy, basically. She thought if she could just become the ultimate soldier, that hyper-masculine ideal, then maybe this other part of her, the female part, would just disappear.
Which, of course, is not how identity works.
Not at all. And basic training was, by all accounts, a complete disaster. Physically, she's tiny, 5'2", maybe 105 pounds.
So she's an immediate target for the drill sergeants and the other recruits.
Relentlessly. She was the weakest linked, physically. But this is where we see that spark of defiance, that refusal to be broken that becomes so important later.
She didn't just take the abuse.
No. When the drill sergeants would get in her face and scream, she would scream right back at them.
Which is not the recommended course of action in basic training.
Definitely not. But it earned her this ironic nickname. The other soldiers started calling her General Manning.
General Manning, the smallest private in the platoon, screaming back at the brass. There's a certain rigidity there, isn't there? A refusal to bend.
A refusal to be crushed. And somehow, despite nearly being discharged for adjustment disorder, she makes it through. She graduates. And she goes to Fort Huachuca in Arizona for intelligence training.
This is the moment. This is the critical juncture where the door opens.
This is where she gets her top secret sensitive compartmented information clearance. TSSCI.
The keys to the kingdom.
All of them. And we really have to pause here and just absorb the irony. Because you have a soldier with a documented history of severe emotional distress.
The adjustment disorder, the outbursts.
Right. And someone who had already been formally reprimanded for posting videos on YouTube describing the inside of a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility.
Well, wait, hold on. She did that before the major leaks. She posted videos about a secure facility on YouTube.
Yes. A huge operational security violation. She was disciplined for it.
And she still kept her high-level clearance. How is that even possible?
The simplest answer is They were desperate. It was the height of the surge. They had a massive shortage of intelligence analysts. They needed people who could process data, and she was good at it.
Yeah.
They needed warm bodies in those seats.
So the system saw the red flags, acknowledged the red flags, and then just pushed her through anyway.
They waived them, they noted them, and then they handed her the keys. She's given access to SIPRNet, the Secret Internet Protocol Router Network.
Which is where everything is.
Everything. The war logs, the diplomatic cables, all of it. The system decided she was good enough. And so in 2009, Private First Class Manning deploys to Iraq.
And this brings us right into the heart of it all. Section 2. The fog of war. She's stationed at Forward Operating Base Hammer, just outside Baghdad. And the working conditions sound. I mean, grim doesn't even begin to cover it.
No, it's a pressure cooker, an absolute pressure cooker. Imagine working 14, sometimes 15-hour night shifts. You're in a dimly lit, windowless room, just staring at screens.
And what you're seeing on those screens it's the raw data of war.
It's death and destruction in near real time. That's the bizarre reality of modern intelligence work. Your body is perfectly safe on a secure base, but your mind is just swimming in violence and trauma.
All while she's completely isolated, she's deeply unhappy. Don't ask, don't tell is still the law. So she can't be openly gay, let alone begin to talk about her gender identity.
She can't talk to her colleagues about her life, and because of the classified nature of her work, she can't talk to her family about her job. She is completely walled off.
And that pressure starts to build. It has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Which leads to the table flipping incident.
Right. December 2009. She's been persistently late for her shifts, which is often a classic sign of depression or burnout.
Yeah.
And she's told she's going to lose her one day off a week as a result, and she just snaps.
She doesn't just argue, she flips the table over.
Destroys a computer. She has to be physically restrained by other soldiers, and according to testimony, she lunged for the weapons rack.
She went for the weapons rack.
She did. She was tackled before she could get to it.
Okay, again, this feels like a moment where any sane system would say, this person should not have access to our nation's most sensitive secrets.
You would think.
Mm-hmm.
And witnesses testified later that's exactly what they thought. One of her supervisors actually drew up the paperwork to have her clearance revoked.
But it never happened.
It never happened. The need for analysts was too great. The machine needed its cogs. So they kept her in place, a ticking time bomb in the heart of the intelligence apparatus.
But the thing that finally pushes her over the edge, the thing that turns her from just a troubled soldier into a whistleblower, it wasn't about her schedule or her personal stress.
No. This is the moral pivot. This is the moment the story goes from being about an unstable soldier to being about a conscientious objector.
It was about the 15 detainees.
That's right. Manning's unit is tasked with helping the Iraqi Federal Police, and she's told to investigate a group of 15 people they've arrested.
And the charge is that they were printing anti-Iraqi literature.
Which sounds like, insurgent propaganda, making IED manuals, calling for attacks.
The kind of thing you'd expect.
That was the assumption. But Manning is a good analyst. She's diligent, so she gets the so-called literature translated.
And it's not what they think it is.
Not even close. It's not terrorist propaganda at all. It's a paper trail. It's an investigation into financial corruption that leads directly to members of the Iraqi cabinet.
So these people weren't insurgents. They were journalists or activists.
They were whistleblowers, basically. They were trying to expose the corruption in the very government the United States was propping up.
And the U.S. military is helping to round them up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She realizes the U.S. is providing the intelligence and the muscle for a political purge. So she takes this information to her commanding officer. She says, look, these aren't the bad guys. These people are exposing corruption.
And what's the response?
The response is what changed everything. Her superior officer basically told her to drop it.
Just drop it.
Drop it. And not just that, he told her to stop digging into the corruption and instead focus on helping the Iraqi police find more detainees.
Wow. Help them find more.
That was the moment. She said later that she realized in that instant she was, quote, actively involved in something I was completely against.
It wasn't an abstract opposition to war anymore. It was a specific, tangible act she felt was a betrayal of American values.
Precisely. She felt the system wasn't just flawed, it was broken. It was being used for evil. And she believed, rightly or wrongly, that if the American public could only see the raw data, what she called the historical documents, they would be outraged and demand change. She wanted to, in her words, remove the fog of war.
So the decision is made. She's going to leak. But how do you actually do that? You're talking about hundreds of thousands of files on a closed air-gapped network.
Right. SIPRnet is sealed off from the public internet for a reason. You can't just attach these files to an email. But there was a vulnerability, a very human one.
The computers had disk drives.
They had CD and DVD drives, and unbelievably, soldiers were allowed to brew in their own discs to listen to music or watch movies during their long shifts.
That seems like a pretty massive security hole in retrospect.
A gigantic one. And Manning exploited it, but not before trying the traditional route.
Oh, right. She tried to go to the press first.
She did. She contacted a reporter at the Washington Post, but the reporter seemed uninterested, or maybe just didn't get the scale of what she was offering. She left a voicemail for the public editor at the New York Times.
And they never called her back.
Never called her back. Imagine being that person who missed that call.
A tough one to live with. So the mainstream media fails her. She turns to the alternative.
She turns to WikiLeaks. She'd already made contact with them using encrypted chat programs like Jabber and IRC. She built a rapport with someone on the other end she believed was Julian Assange, though they never actually used their real names.
So she has the outlet. Now she just needs to get the data out of the building.
Yeah.
And this is the famous Lady Gaga method.
It's so brilliant in its simplicity. It's both incredibly low-tech and high-tech at the same time. She would come into the SCIF, the secure room, with a blank CDRW.
One she had labeled Lady Gaga.
Or something similar, yeah. Lady Gaga, Katy Perry. She'd pop it into the computer's drive, and then she would start downloading these massive troves of documents. The 400,000 Iraq war logs, the 91,000 from Afghanistan.
And while this data transfer is happening, which must have taken some time,
she would put on headphones and lip sync to Lady Gaga's music.
She's lip syncing.
To Telephone, to Bad Romance. So if anyone walks by and glances at her, she just looks like another bored analyst zoning out, listening to pop music to get through a long shift.
Meanwhile, a progress bar on her screen is ticking along, copying the secret history of 2 wars onto a rewritable disk.
It's a cinematic moment.
Yeah.
It really is. It captures the whole absurd reality of the situation.
So she gets the disks out. She can take them back to her quarters, transfer the data to her personal laptop, and then upload it to the WikiLeaks servers.
And the world changes.
So let's talk about what was actually on those disks. We've mentioned the big numbers, but what were the actual bombshells that came out of this?
I think you can group them into 3 main buckets. First, you've got the war logs from Iraq and Afghanistan.
These are the SIGACs, right? The Significant Activities Reports.
Exactly. The day-to-day grind of the war, as reported by the units on the ground. And what they revealed was, first, a much higher civilian death toll than the government had ever publicly admitted to.
And they also documented incidents of torture by our Iraqi allies that U.S. forces witnessed and were ordered not to intervene in.
Right. They exposed the dirty, brutal reality of this kind of counterinsurgency warfare. It was a ground-level view that the public had never seen.
Okay, so that's bucket 1. What's the second?
The second is the diplomatic cables. Over 250,000 of them. This was the Cablegate leak.
And this was almost more embarrassing for the government than the war logs in some ways.
Because it was the unvarnished, behind-the-scenes chatter from U.S. embassies all over the world. It showed what diplomats really thought about foreign leaders. It exposed corruption in dozens of countries.
Like in Tunisia.
Especially Tunisia. The cables that came out about the corruption of the ruling Ben Ali family there were so damning, so specific, that many people directly credit them with fueling the protests that grew into the Arab Spring.
A revolution sparked, in part, by a data leak.
It's a powerful idea. But the thing that really broke through, the content that went viral and seared itself into the public consciousness, was the video.
Collateral murder.
That's the name WikiLeaks gave it. It was gun camera footage from a U.S. Apache helicopter in Baghdad from back in 2007.
And it's incredibly difficult to watch.
It is. The helicopter crew spots a group of men walking down a street. They misidentify a camera held by a Reuters journalist as an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade.
And they get permission to engage.
And they open fire with a 30-millimeter cannon. They kill the journalist, his driver, several other men.
And it doesn't even stop there. That's the most horrifying part.
No. A van pulls up. A good Samaritan, a father taking his 2 young children to school, stops to try and help the wounded.
And the helicopter crew asks for, and receives, permission to fire on the van.
They obliterate the van. They kill the father and severely wound the 2 small children inside.
And the audio, the chatter from the pilots, is what I think really shook people to their core.
It was so casual, so detached. Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards. Nice. It sounded like they were playing a video game.
It removed that fog of war she was talking about and showed people something raw and ugly.
It did. The leaks are out. The video is everywhere. WikiLeaks publishes it in April of 2010. The world is reeling. But Manning is still just a private in Iraq. Nobody knows it was her.
So how does she get caught? Because at that point, she's the most consequential anonymous source on the planet.
It all comes back to that core theme of isolation. She'd done this monumental thing, changed the world, but she had no one she could tell. She was bursting with it. And that pressure leads her to reach out.
First, inside the military. That email she sent.
Right. In April 2010, she emails her direct supervisor, Master Sergeant Paul Adkins. The subject line is just 2 words. My problem.
And attached to the email is a photo of herself.
A photo of herself in a wig, wearing makeup, presenting as a woman. And in the email she writes about her gender identity disorder, says it's tearing her apart. It's an absolute cry for help.
She's effectively outing herself as trans to her army supervisor in Iraq in 2010.
An incredible risk. And what does the supervisor do?
He does nothing.
Nothing. He later testified he didn't report it up the chain of command because he was worried the photo would get passed around, that she'd be mocked. He thought he was protecting her.
But in reality, he was ignoring a subordinate in a massive state of crisis.
So she's screaming for help, and all she gets back is silence. So she turns back to the only place she trusts.
The internet.
She reaches out online to a man named Adrian Lameau.
And who was Adrian Lamarck?
He was a well-known figure in the hacker community, so-called gray hat hacker. He'd famously broken into systems at Microsoft, the New York Times, but then he'd helped them fix their security flaws. He had a certain reputation.
And Manning saw him as a kindred spirit.
She thought he would get it. Using the chat handle broadass87, she starts talking to Lameau in May of 2010.
Yeah.
And it all comes pouring out.
The full confession.
Everything. She tells him, I want people to see the truth because without information, you cannot make informed decisions as a public. She tells him about the Lady Gaga CD, the war logs, the collateral murder video. She trusts him.
She thought she was talking to a confidant.
She did. She literally wrote to him, I'm talking to you as someone who needs moral and emotional support. But Lameau saw it very differently.
He was worried about the potential harm.
He was. He became convinced that the unredacted documents, particularly the Afghan war logs, contained the names of local Afghans who were helping U.S. forces. And he believed if those names got out, the Taliban would hunt them down and execute them.
He thought lives were on the line.
He did. And so he made a choice. He contacted the authorities. He turned over the entire package of chat logs to the Army's Criminal Investigation Division and the FBI.
And just like that, it was over.
The betrayal must have been absolute. Lameau turns her in. Manning is arrested at her base in Iraq in late May 2010. And that's the end of one nightmare and the beginning of a whole new one.
The confinement.
Yeah. She's flown first to a detention center in Kuwait and then to the Marine Corps brig in Quantico, Virginia. And the conditions of her confinement there, they became a global scandal.
She was placed on prevention of injury status, or POI, which sounds protective, but the reality was...
The reality was 23-hour-a-day solitary confinement.
In a tiny cell.
A 6 by 12-foot cell with no window. A guard would check on her every 5 minutes, day and night. She wasn't allowed to lie down or even lean against the wall between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. No pillow, no sheets.
And then there was the incident where she was forced to sleep naked. Given her gender dysphoria, that just seems uniquely cruel.
It was incredibly cruel. The guards said she couldn't have her underwear because she might use the elastic waistband to harm herself, and she made a sarcastic remark, something like, if I wanted to kill myself, I could do it with my flip-flops.
And they took that as a legitimate threat.
They used it as a pretext to strip her of all her clothing. For several nights, she was forced to be completely naked in her cell and stand for inspection naked in the morning.
It doesn't sound like suicide prevention. It sounds like a deliberate effort to break someone's spirit.
And that's certainly how the international community saw it. The UN's Special Rapporteur on Torture officially called her treatment cruel, inhuman, and degrading.
Even the State Department's own spokesman, a man named Philip J. Crowley, publicly called the treatment ridiculous, counterproductive, and stupid.
And he was forced to resign for saying it. But the damage was done. The U.S. government looked like bullies.
So after all that, we finally get to the court-martial. The trial begins in the summer of 2013, and the government throws the book at her. 22 separate charges.
Including the most serious one imaginable, aiding the enemy.
Okay, let's break that charge down. Because that's the one that sent a chill down the spine of every national security journalist in America.
It's a capital offense. It can carry the death penalty, although the prosecution said they weren't seeking it in her case. But the legal theory behind it was radical.
Their argument was what, exactly?
The prosecution argued that because Manning released this information onto the internet, she had to have known that the enemy, specifically al-Qaeda, would be able to access it, and therefore she was knowingly giving intelligence to them.
But the implications of that are staggering. By that logic, any newspaper that publishes a classified secret is aiding the enemy, because the enemy can buy a newspaper or read a website.
Precisely. It erases the line between a whistleblower who is trying to inform the public and a spy who is selling secrets to a foreign power. It criminalizes investigative journalism.
So the defense had to fight that charge tooth and nail.
They did. Their core argument was about intent. They brought in psychiatrists who testified about her mental health struggles, the gender dysphoria, narcissistic traits, even Asperger's and fetal alcohol syndrome. They argued she wasn't a traitor, she was a troubled, naive kid acting out a grandiose ideation.
They said her goal was to spark a public debate to end the wars, not to help al-Qaeda win them.
Exactly. Her intent, they argued, was to inform Americans not to aid their enemies.
In the verdict, when it came down in July 2013,
it was a huge, huge victory for the defense on that one critical charge. The judge acquitted her of aiding the enemy. She found that the government had failed to prove Manning had actual knowledge that the enemy would get the information.
that set a massive precedent for future leak cases. But she didn't walk out of the courtroom a free woman.
Not even close. She was found guilty on 17 of the other 22 charges. Multiple violations of the Espionage Act, theft, computer fraud.
And the sentence, when it was handed down a few weeks later, was a bombshell.
35 years in a maximum security military prison. It was, by far, the longest sentence ever given for a leak in American history.
A message was clearly being set. But then, just when you think the story has reached its dramatic conclusion, the very next day, the narrative shifts again.
August 22nd, 2013, the day after her sentencing, she authorizes her lawyer to release a statement to the Today Show.
And that statement began, "I'm Chelsea Manning. I am a female."
And she announced her intention to begin hormone therapy as soon as possible and requested to be referred to by her new name and with female pronouns.
It's an incredible act of defiance and self-reclamation. She's just been handed a 35-year sentence, and her first public act is to say, "You can lock up my body, but you can no longer misgender my soul. Bradley is gone."
It completely reframed the conversation. This was no longer just about a leaker. It was now about transgender rights in the U.S. military, a subject they were completely unprepared to deal with.
So she's sent to the U.S. disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth. What was life like for her there?
It was a constant fight. The military resisted her transition at every turn. She had to sue them just to get access to hormone therapy.
And they finally approved that in 2015, right? A first for the military.
A historic first, yes. But it came with all these cruel caveats. They gave in the hormones, but they initially denied her the right to grow her hair long or get gender-affirming surgery. She was forced to adhere to male grooming standards.
So she's living in this impossible limbo, a body chemically transitioning to female, but forced to present outwardly as a male soldier.
The psychological toll was immense. She attempted suicide twice in 2016.
And in this really twisted piece of bureaucratic logic, she was disciplined for the attempts.
She was put in solitary confinement as punishment for trying to take her own life.
It's beyond comprehension. You punish a person who is in a deep mental health crisis by making their isolation even more extreme.
It's what led her to her last resort, a hunger strike. In September 2016, she announced she would not eat or drink until the Army agreed to provide the gender transition surgery she needed.
And it worked. The Army caved.
They did. They agreed to provide the surgery. But before that could ever happen, the entire political landscape shifted.
We're in the final days of the Obama administration. January 17th, 2017, 3 days before Donald Trump's inauguration.
President Obama commutes Chelsea Manning's sentence.
Now, that's an important distinction. It wasn't a pardon.
No, not a pardon. A pardon forgives the crime. A commutation simply shortens the sentence. Her convictions still stand. She is, to this day, a convicted felon.
And Obama's reasoning.
He said that she had served 7 hard years, and that the original 35-year sentence was disproportionate when compared to sentences given to other leakers.
The incoming president, Donald Trump, did not agree.
Not at all. He immediately tweeted that Manning was an ungrateful traitor who should never have been released. But it was too late. The decision was made.
And in May of 2017, After 7 years in custody, Chelsea Manning walked out of Fort Leavenworth a free woman.
But her life as a public figure was really just beginning. She didn't fade into obscurity.
Far from it. She ran for the U.S. Senate.
In 2018, yeah. She mounted a primary challenge against the incumbent Democrat Ben Cardin in Maryland. It was a long shot, and she only got about 5.8% of the vote, but it was a statement. It showed she wanted to engage with the system, not just tear it down.
But it wasn't all political activism. There were some real controversies. The Harvard Fellowship, for instance.
Oh, that was a huge mess. Harvard's Kennedy School invited her to be a visiting fellow, and the backlash from the intelligence community was immediate and overwhelming.
The CIA director at the time, Mike Pompeo, canceled a speaking engagement there in protest.
The former deputy director of the CIA resigned his own fellowship, and within about 24 hours, Harvard folded. They rescinded her fellowship invitation. It was a clear sign that the establishment had not forgotten and had not forgiven.
And then there was that very strange period where she was seen associating with figures from the alt-right.
That was really confusing for a lot of her supporters. Photos surfaced of her at events with well-known far-right personalities. Her explanation was that she was gathering intelligence on them, that a spy is a spy, but it definitely alienated people on the left.
She remains a very complex, very hard to categorize figure. And just when it seemed like her legal battles were finally behind her, 2019 happens.
She's back in jail.
Why? What happened?
The grand jury investigation into Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Federal prosecutors subpoenaed her, demanding she testify.
But she'd already testified for hours during her own court-martial. What more could she have to say?
She said she had nothing new to add, but her objection was more fundamental. She has a deep, principled opposition to the secret nature of grand juries, where defense lawyers aren't allowed in the room. She called them a predatory practice, and so she refused to testify.
She was held in civil contempt of court.
And sent back to jail. She ended up spending nearly a full year incarcerated, from March 2019 to March 2020, and the judge imposed these crushing daily fines.
It was something like $1,000 a day by the end, right? She racked up a debt of over $250,000.
Which her supporters amazingly crowdfunded and paid off in about 2 days after her release. But that year back in jail took its toll. She attempted suicide again in March of 2020.
And it was only after that that the judge finally ordered her released, saying her refusal to testify was clearly unshakable and her continued imprisonment served no purpose.
It's just this relentless, punishing cycle of conflict with the state.
So that brings us to today. After all of this, the leak, the trial, the prison, the commutation, the reincarceration, what's the legacy? What was the actual impact of what she did?
That's the billion-dollar question. On the one hand, you can draw a direct line from the collateral murder video and the war logs to a major shift in public opinion against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. They fueled the anti-war movement.
And, as we said, the diplomatic cables may have helped spark the Arab Spring.
Right. But on the other hand, what about all the dire warnings of the damage it would cause, the blood on her hands rhetoric?
Well, a few years ago, a 2017 Defense Department report, which was classified at the time, was released through a Freedom of Information Act request. And it concluded that the leaks had, quote, no significant strategic impact on the war efforts.
No significant strategic impact after all of that. It strongly suggests that the initial hysteria was more about government embarrassment than it was about actual national security damage.
The war machine just kept on turning. And what about Chelsea Manning herself? What is her life like now?
She's trying to build a life. She published a memoir in 2022 called readme.txt, which focuses a lot on her personal journey. She's working in information security now for a company called NIM Technologies.
Back to her roots.
And she's a DJ. She DJs in clubs. But the past is never far away. She's still barred from entering countries like Canada and Australia because of her felony convictions. That shadow follows her.
So when you pull back and look at the whole arc, you have this bullied, isolated kid from Oklahoma who becomes this catalyst for a global political firestorm. A soldier who feels forced to betray their oath in order to uphold what they see as a higher moral duty. A person fighting for their own identity while locked in a military prison.
She's impossible to simplify. She's not just a hacker, not just a soldier, not just a traitor, not just a hero. She's this figure where a profound personal crisis, her gender identity, her isolation became completely and inextricably linked with a moment in our national history.
And it really leaves you and everyone listening with this fundamental question for our digital age. When you are inside a powerful institution and you see something that you believe is deeply morally wrong, Where does your loyalty lie?
Is it to the institution and the rules you agreed to follow? Or is it to the public and what you believe is their right to know?
And what are you willing to pay for that choice? Because, as the story of Chelsea Manning proves, the personal cost can be almost everything.